Good afternoon, and on behalf of our principal investigator, Dr. Linda Goggin, and myself, welcome to the National Family Support Technical Assistance Center's office hours. This is a running series. Today's topic is Systems Knowledge and Navigation, Family Peer Support Across the System. I'm Gail Cormier, the Project Director of NASTAC, the Family Center of Excellence, and we are proudly led by the National Federation of Families. This month's office series is designed for the family workforce in mind. We're preparing the family peer workforce for systems transformation and authentic family partnership. We'll focus on supporting the family peer workforce. Each month, a subject matter expert, usually a family peer specialist, will introduce one of the 5 core competencies for family peer specialists. Before we get started on our very interactive conversation today, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's conversation is being recorded. The recording and any additional resources will be uploaded to our NASTAC website under the Events tab. If you have any technical difficulties, please type your name or your comment in the chat and someone will be able to assist you. Please also type your questions for the presenters in the chat box. We'll be watching the chat during the entire presentation, and if time allows, we will interject your questions. Our goal for office hours is to encourage a conversation between our guest presenters and all of you in the audience. We encourage you to ask questions that will assist you in your daily work. This is your time to ask questions and really get some tools that you may need. If you can use the raise your hand button, that would be helpful. NASTAC hopes you leave this event invigorated and with new ideas to help you do your work. We ask that you take time to complete a short feedback survey using the link provided at the end of the presentation. This survey will help us continuously improve our events, and it also fulfills our SAMHSA funding obligations. Please note, all information will be confidential and we will respect your privacy. We do not offer CEU credits for our events, but you will receive a certificate of attendance after the survey is completed. And you can use the certificate as part of your certification renewal or if you're applying. I would like to thank SAMHSA for allowing us to share this information with you today, and thank you all for joining. I also want to go over that we do use the NASTAC family-driven language. We always try to be trauma responsive, strengths-based. We avoid blaming caregivers. We want to be as inclusive as possible. We use person-first language. We want to be respectful, non-judgmental, that's an important one, and consistent with our actions. At this time, I would like to introduce you to NASTAC's project manager for this series, Dana Asby. Dana will also be introducing our guest speakers today. Dana?
Thank you, Gail, and thank you everyone for being with us today. As Gail mentioned, this office hour series is preparing the family workforce for systems transformation and authentic family partnership. So during this 6-month series, we have the goals to support family peers to build skills that align with the 5 core competencies. We also hope that this series will inspire you to challenge family serving systems through advocacy for family-driven care policies, language, and systems. And we also want to provide you with some resources, tools, and opportunities for peer learning during this time. We have some recordings on the National Federation of Families YouTube site about our first 3 sessions on wellness and resiliency, affecting change, and resources and natural supports. We're excited to offer you the first of 2 sessions on systems knowledge and navigation, and we have a special edition office hour on April 2nd that's going to continue that conversation. And then join us in May and June for 2 sessions on professional responsibility. For today's office hour about systems knowledge navigation, we hope that you'll leave this session with better understanding of how family peers can partner with systems staff to increase acceptance of mental health and substance use challenges. We also hope that this session will help you better understand how family peers work navigating systems alongside families can lead to the social justice that we're all working towards. We also want you to be able to take some tools and strategies away today that you can immediately use in your work to support families in navigating systems. And you'll get the slides and a link to the recording, as well as all of the various resources that we're going to be sharing with you via chat today. You'll get all of that in a follow-up email. We also hope that after today's session, you'll be able to understand a little bit of the differences in navigating with systems with families whose loved ones are over age 26 compared to child serving systems. But join us on April 2nd to learn even more about that topic. So we're going to start out today with a poll, and you can either visit the link that is going to be put in the chat and type in that code at the bottom, 5159011, or you can visit the link that's about to be put in the chat. You can also go to menti.com. We're curious to learn about you in the room and which systems you personally navigate alongside the families that you support. And you can click as many as you want. If you navigate all of these systems, click each one. But if there's one that's not listed here in our poll, please share in the chat as well. So it looks like we've got folks navigating all the various systems: mental health, substance use, education, justice, child welfare, housing. Got a lot of folks navigating mental health and education systems, but a little bit of everything. And for those folks, those 5 of you who are navigating other systems, please share in the chat. We'd love to hear the other systems that you're navigating. Wow, a lot of folks are doing mental health and education. We know that a lot of families need support when navigating those very complex systems. Well, keep voting and keep sharing in the chat. Special healthcare needs, yes. And we'll share the final results of this poll with you when you get the slides after this session. So let's get started with our session. Our first presenter today is Ebony Chambers. She's an instructor at the University of California, Davis. She has such an impressive resume. I'm not going to read all of it now, but she has over 20 years of experience working with issues of social justice, equity, child welfare, mental health, and diversity. She is a speaker, educator, and facilitator who's worked all over the U.S. and served nationally and locally in her community as an advocate and activist for access to care. She has won a lot of wonderful nominations and awards that you can read about. And I'm really excited to introduce Ebony to you all so she can share her wealth of knowledge about navigating the child welfare system. Ebony?
Thanks so much, Dana, and good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here in this space with so many advocates for peer-delivered services. As Dana shared, my name is Ebony Chambers McClinton, and I have my own personal lived experience with navigating the adoption system, child welfare, behavioral health, and the juvenile justice system with my daughter, who is now 31. And I'm a mom of 4. I have kids that range from 16 to 31, and I have 2 grandkids that I'm super proud of and love very much. I started in children's services many years ago, and at first was an administrator for residential programs in California, and then moved into supporting wraparound and behavioral health teams support families with reunification. At that time was when I was actually navigating some of my own lived experience with my now adult daughter, and I realized the significant gaps that our community was facing as someone who was navigating the system, and then also working in the system. It just became really clear that there was a real need for peers, and I was lucky enough to be able to have and be able to work with peers, and that really inspired and motivated me to actually start our family and youth partnership programs. So what you see here, excuse me, are a number of the programs that are now currently operating in Northern California. We have child welfare parent partners that are county co-located in child welfare offices, a commercially sexually exploited program that works with survivors of sexual exploitation, and they themselves are also survivors. We have a housing navigation program, and those are all peers that have experienced homelessness and are supporting families with housing and making sure they get connected to housing vouchers or in their systems. We also have an empowerment training center, and that training center is open to community members to really support and empower with learning opportunities and training if there are those that have navigated systems and are now interested in working as a parent partner or a youth partner in the field. And then, of course, some of the other ones that I mentioned already, wraparound outpatient mental health support with kinship, as well as cultural brokers. I didn't start off by saying this, but I think it is important to note that, having peers in this work, as Dana even mentioned, that social justice aspect, that is a social justice strategy, right? That we say nothing about us without us in the work that we do. And it is extremely important for peers to be a part of social justice strategies and for peers to also be reflective of their community, which really connects us to that equity. Real family engagement leads to authentic family engagement, and so that's an important part of this work. So as we look at the work that peer partners are doing, they're really supporting in these 4 phases of system navigation, engagement, planning, implementation, and transition. And I'm just going to walk through some of the different strategies and hopefully share a couple of resources that you may be able to take away into the work that you're doing or utilize in a way that may be important to the communities that you're serving. So we'll start off with engagement. And so in this area of engagement, family partners and youth advocates are at that very first initial juncture of meeting with families. And we recognize that oftentimes families are in a space of being really overwhelmed and lots of information is being thrown at them. I had that same experience as someone with lived experience. And so family partners and youth advocates are at that very first intake meeting to provide some additional support with navigation, to break down some of the language. I always call it like the alphabet jargon that can be really difficult for families to try to, pull apart and understand. And so family partners and youth partners are there to provide some additional support there. I think what's really important in that engagement aspect is oftentimes systems are doing things to families and not with families, or they're doing things for families and not with families. And this is an important part of the system navigation that peers are supporting with, in making sure that whatever the needs that the family and the youth are elevating is the priority focus, and that they're truly the ones that are in partnership, if not leading the program and the delivery of their services. And really, at this point, gaining a true understanding of what family voice and choice really means, and offering whatever educational areas they'd like to learn more about and engage with them in this area. There's also an opportunity to think about what kind of resources the family need and ensure that they have those at that point of that engagement, so that they're walking away at that very first point of contact with some resources and strategies. And then as we move into planning, there's a couple of planning tools that the peers that we work with support. And it looks like those resources are being dropped into the chat. So thank you so much, Lachelle, as those go in. Our peers utilize something called a transition readiness scale, and in just a bit we'll move to the slide with that information on there. But they'll also utilize the CANS, and the peers are trained specifically in CANS, but to use the caregiver the caregiver section. There's a caregiver needs and resources section, and those assessments are done within the first 30 days and then every 90 days thereafter. I think what's really important about this planning process, again, is it's done with families because we continue to be family driven and person centered in the work that we're doing. So we'll take a look at the tool here, I think on the next slide. So this is an example of a completed, not a fully completed, because if it was, there'd be some comments, but really just the transition readiness scale and an opportunity for families to, this can be done with a youth or a caregiver. And you'll see there are 7 kind of domain areas where the families are rating themselves right within the first 30 days of service of where do they feel they land in setting goals, or how do they feel they're doing in managing crisis? How strong is their support team? How well do they feel they're advocating for themselves? And you'll see the Likert kind of scale with some options from a 1 where they're maybe not speaking up and advocating for themselves, or all the way to a 5 where they self-advocate for themselves. So the peer that's supporting them really helps them to kind of look at those different scales. And based on this current scale, you'll see they would probably focus some additional support. The peer would help them navigate some additional support around support systems since they rated themselves a 2, as well as they would help them with maybe following through as they rated themselves a 3 there. Under the CANS section, the resources and needs domain, there's questions on this CANS, and this one is not as used as frequently. The transition readiness scale is one that we find the most family driven, but this gives an opportunity for the family and the peer that's supporting them to explore some of these questions and then put a plan in place to help them maybe deal with family stresses and support them in any other physical or mental health needs that make parenting difficult for them. And then from there, and knowing that while I'm talking about it in a very linear process, it is actually quite cyclical in the sense that we can start with engagement, move to planning and implementation, and need to go back to engagement. But for the sake of this time, just moving into implementation. And this is after maybe a couple of different priorities have been elevated that the youth and the families are communicating they'd really like to work on. And that's when they begin to really start to implement some of the strategies that the family have identified they'd like to move forward with. We are getting them connected with resources, communicating with the rest of the team, making sure that everyone's updated, supporting the family in speaking up for themselves in child and family team meetings and whatever other interdisciplinary meetings that are happening with the family. And then from there, moving into transition, we like to say we do for, do with, cheer on at times, as sometimes our families are in this space where they are experiencing so many moving parts. And there are times where as a peer, we're stepping in and sometimes doing for in that a very initial phase, and then doing some teaching, doing with, but in the transition phase, we're really cheering on because the family has hopefully gained some really valuable skills. They are hopefully engaged and excited about transition and moving systems out of their lives and having that self-efficacy that they desired when they first came into the systems, and then supporting them with any long-term supports that will help them with sustainability. And then, of course, success, so celebrating those successes and making sure that they feel valued and seen for the hard work that they've been doing. And there's a lot of other areas of support. In addition to that one-on-one support, some of the other areas are around support groups. One of the areas that I have appreciated with the pandemic has been that we've been able to move a lot of those support groups that were in person that may have caused some barriers around transportation to now virtually, but also designing them to really be more culturally responsive. So support groups that support LGBTQ parents, grandparents, those that are impacted by the juvenile justice system, father support groups, and many others that really can be more responsive to families' needs. Our peers are also supporting with family finding. We've adapted the Cornell University curriculum to provide crisis intervention one-on-one to families, as well as opportunities for shared leadership where our parents and our youth review our policies and practices. That's our Resilient Youth Speak Out and our shared leadership. Opportunities for feedback like our parent and youth panels, as well as support groups that support with living skills. All right, and I think that's it for me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ebony. That was such a wealth of information, and those resources that you shared are so valuable. And I know you were focused on child welfare, but I could see how those skills and strategies are helpful for navigating a lot of different systems with families. So we appreciate all of that. Thank you so much. And now I'm really excited to introduce the Executive Director of Justice for Families, Jeanette Bocanegra. Again, she has a very impressive and long resume, and you can read that when you get our slides, but she has become a family advocate with youth in the juvenile justice system because of her own experiences, which she will talk about briefly at the beginning of her presentation. And as her in the course of her advocacy journey, she became involved via public school volunteering, PTA vice president and president, and that led her through a series of really impressive professional accomplishments on to really bringing Justice for Families into the world to be this great advocacy group that does a lot of wonderful work in the world of juvenile justice. So now I'm excited to introduce you to Jeanette.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you for the invitation. And as we look at all these systems, right, they're all very challenging and very hard to navigate. You know, I tell folks I started my advocacy at the school system, helping families and young people, families that couldn't understand IEPs, families that were navigating the language. So very difficult, but it was easy for me. But as a parent navigating the justice system, that became a challenge. So thank you for inviting me to speak about navigating the justice system and how we can support each other. It's one of the systems that also can stigmatize parents as a horrible parent. And, you know, we hear these comments, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But we're demonstrating different. We're demonstrating that parents are the first, right, that can provide young people and their children with the ability to thrive, given the skills. So thank you. On behalf of Justice for Families, right, we really support that peer advocacy. Who are we? We're families that love our children. We're families that are rooted in our community. So we were founded in 2011 as a national organization working with families directly impacted by the justice system. Working on this report really highlighted the crisis that communities across the country have been facing for generations. The report demonstrated that it was a crisis and our children were not coming back, being able to be productive members. The families that worked on this report were families that loved their children. They also want to be involved in their treatment. You know, we heard about family planning and how families can get involved in making those recommendations of what can work. So partnering with families, it's a key, right? Nothing with families without families. The majority of our families also were impacted in communities that were deeply impacted by policies and practices, tough on crime policies. Our families, also this report demonstrated that our families were hardworking individuals, you know, that loved their community, wanted a community that was safe. Many of our families also, the media demonstrate us as we don't love our children. Again, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And as I got involved, right, it's one of the topics that no one likes to talk about. As an advocate of the school system and a community leader, being impacted by the justice system was not a topic that is easy to talk about. But the report also highlighted, and it helped me understand what are the things that we need to do to destigmatize how families are portrayed, and talk about, right, how do we support families so that we can share some of the challenges and partner, because we talk about partnership. We talk about how systems have been enforcing techniques that have been, I know, better, very paternalistic or very punitive. And we know that the best way to see outcomes that allow us to give young people opportunities and be fair is actually partnering and understanding the system. So our goals are to transform how systems been working with young people and families and invest in young people and move away those resources that have not worked. And, when we talk about data, we have data that demonstrates that for far too long, right, we've been using techniques that have not helped. So how do we invest those resources back into communities so that we can thrive and build the capacity, right, to support the work that needs to get done? I saw the survey that was done. And when we look across what system is impacting us, they are harsh, right? There's policies that are difficult to understand, and there's practices, right, that need to change. So how do we support and educate our families so that they understand that their involvement, their commitment as well, because this is a commitment to strengthen communities that are having challenges. This is an opportunity to invest those resources into all these systems that have become difficult, right? Prison, juvenile justice, whether we're talking about juvenile facilities or an adult prison with a 26-year-old, they're harsh. And young people and those individuals are going to return to our communities. We use 3 core strategies, but I'm going to focus on the leadership development of our families, providing families with the tools that they need so that they can go back into their jurisdiction, whether it's here in New York with the Department of Probation or here in New York with the Department of the Child Welfare. But how do we provide the families the tools that they need so they can go back and again, partner and become that peer support so that all families understand that it is impacting too many young people. We provide technical assistance to jurisdictions, I'm sorry, Dana, to jurisdictions that want to improve their outcomes. And we say that in order to improve outcomes, you definitely have to partner with young people and families. And again, right, providing our families with that peer support. I was at an event this morning, and a principal who's ready to retire, who worked in a school in the South Bronx for 22 years, she said, the best thing that was given to me 10 years ago was a peer that can support me and allow me, right, to talk about my strength and my challenges, and an environment that we can tap into those resources. You can go on to the other slide. After the report, the report has been since 2012, and we're in 2024, and it has been the call to action in juvenile justice in supporting families and being able to bring those changes. Our Family Leadership Institute, it's once a year. We bring 15 families from across the country to talk about some of those challenges and some of those issues that other panelists are going to have spoken about and we're going to be here about, right? The school system, individuals that have been impacted in various ways. Our institute keeps our participants involved. Our institute has also been able to demonstrate with other jurisdictions the impact that having families as partners, having peer navigators, peer support, coaches, champions, makes a big difference in how we deliver the services to young people. Families also can benefit from individual support. We know that the hardest job is to be a parent. The hardest job is to also understand systems that for far too long have dictated, right? I know better. Again, a paternalistic way. And we know that in order to be fair and give young people and families those opportunities to tap into those resources that can strengthen them, not dig them deeper. Sometimes not understanding a system can dig you deeper into more of horrible outcomes. So we provide families with those tools so that they can go back again and look at those policies and bring those reform efforts that are needed. We connect families locally, nationally, and that's what this is amazing, right? As Lori was introducing folks from around the country with the same issues. So we may look different, we may sound different, right? And come from different backgrounds, but the issues and concerns are the same, right? We want our young people to thrive. We want our young people to be successful. We want families to live in communities that are safe. No one wants anything different. So our leadership is to really provide families with an opportunity to understand about trauma, to understand about diversity and racial and ethnic challenges, the brain development. But again, how do we navigate a system that has been punitive, that has penalized families for far too long? So our achievements are that we're able to tap into right different communities and help families understand that you can make a difference, right? We're giving the peer support. We could go into the next slide. And achievements, right? We know that it's hard, but we're in a crisis. We can no longer allow young people to fall into these cracks. It does make a difference when families get involved. And we know that partnership makes a difference. We don't, we no longer just want to see someone involved. It makes a huge difference. But what we really want to see is authentic family partnership. How do we increase authentic family partnership so that we can increase the capacity of what our young people need, right? So they can thrive. How do we provide those tools so that we understand system language? Again, it's hard to navigate. Every system has a language that can become difficult, and that peer support, I say that, I wish I understood even the key players of being in a courthouse. I know who the judge is, right? But if I had a peer who would help me understand that in New York, corporation counsel is not a prestigious lawyer from Fifth Avenue doing pro bono work in family court, right? If a peer navigator would help me understand that corporation counsel is a district attorney, right? When we talk about family court and young people, emerging adults that are navigating in families that are navigating the adult side of the criminal justice system. We use best practices, right? It's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all when working with families, but we also know that the more we talk about some of these strengths and challenges of how we engage families, how do we support young people and also listen to some of their needs and some of their concerns? And again, though we're talking about the achievements and accomplishments and how do we partner with systems that can allow us to build, right, on the strength, not on the mistakes. We can't ignore how these other systems come together. Many times that we meet families that are navigating the juvenile justice system, a large percentage of them are navigating other systems that are just challenging. So the more presentations we go to, that we're inviting, many spaces are virtual as well. After COVID, it allows us again to meet more families, more communities, and more jurisdictions. But we also know that our families need that social support, right? That connection, that one-on-one. Next slide, and I am thirsty. I'm sorry. Knowledge is power, and the more families and the more even systems, folks, we help them understand about the dynamics of our community. We also know that workshops are important for families in those spaces to be in, whether they're in person or virtual. Again, it's not easy understanding system language. Many families, like myself, I felt like I was dropped in a foreign country trying to figure out the language, and I speak too. So it's very difficult. So providing families, right, the resources that they need to understand, even in their native language, the system that is impacting them. Resources are very important, and collaboration. We can't do this alone. This is really family driven, but in collaboration. we definitely, as we say as parents, it takes a village to raise children. It does take, system folks. I can't, we say it's difficult to change a system, but it's easy to transform minds so that we can be fair on how do we work with young people and families. And it come in many different ways, supporting and being able to get them in spaces where they understand advocacy 101, know your rights, wellness, right? We talk about wellness of the mind, but also the wellness of the body and the soul. Also bringing system folks to talk to families, right? I think that my first experience with a system leader was with an amazing commissioner here in New York. And it was after we released our report, how can we support families? And the first session was really a venting session for families. I felt embarrassed. I said, wow, I invited a commissioner who was willing to speak to families. And we invited everyone who was willing to sit down and share their concerns in the community. And, when they vented, he didn't take it personal. It's a system that been working in a certain way, and there's practices that have also harmed our communities. But we know that the intentions when we partner is because if young people do well, families are okay, communities are feel strong, and systems can say, I'm doing a good job, right? And for far too long, families and communities have not trusted. So having a peer that can be a bridge, right, to build a community. We also dealing with generations, trying to build bridges so that our generations can understand, right, the culture and families. I see you. I guess I got 5 more minutes. And again, right, so I am talking about juvenile justice and the hardship of families navigating, but the support that we've been developing and creating to support families. It's really what's needed. And when we look at a system, right, it's supposed to work the way it was designed to work. And building a new way that's holistic, it doesn't blame, it doesn't penalize anybody, but support and strengthen. I know you wanted me to share a story, and I think maybe next time, because I already saw your face, but I want us to know that families and young people deserve an opportunity that we can invest and be that peer support in our communities and that bridge. And when we hold children by the hand, you have a parent by the heart. And that's what my mentor would say. And if I didn't have that peer support, I would not be the pillar that I am for many families that are navigating horrible systems. They're doing exactly what they need to do and what they were created to do. And it no longer works. Our work is highly effective. I say that the work that we're doing here in New York is really to also demonstrate to other family members that we can do it. I am community. I am a mom, and I am an advocate. And I know that the more that we continue letting our guards down, to let other families know we don't have to look a certain way to be in a system. I know that families can be an asset, and the support that we give each other can provide our young people with that support to thrive. And we know that when a young person goes into the system, it disrupts the development. So how do we support young people so they can be effective members of society and strengthen the communities that they live in. You know, peer coaching, right? It's really being authentic, two people together reflecting on current practices and expand, refine, like fine wine, the skills and share good ideas, coming to consensus. What's the best thing for our young people and families? A peer coach increases accountability and motivation to achieve goals with stronger confidence in leadership and in decision making. A peer coach, oh, you know, this reminds me, you can go back, you know, character, integrity, high standards, right, is important, boundaries. But this reminds me of the importance of supporting families, because this was a grandma who had a grandchild, who she was raising her grandchild who was in the system. And though she was connected to resources in the community, even a church, it was not easy to talk about that there was someone in her life who she loved dearly in a juvenile facility. And we say, I wasn't just a peer support, but we became like family members, right? And that's an extension of a family. We say when you build that support, it's an extension to family, and family is not defined by blood.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. That was so powerful. And Jeanette has so much more to share with you. In fact, we at NAFSTAC did a much longer webinar with Jeanette that you can find on the NAFSTAC website. So if you want to hear more of her wisdom, please do check that out. And she'll be with us to answer questions alongside Ebony and Margot, our last presenter, after our breakout room activity. All right, so our last presenter is Margot Pierce. She is the statewide coordinator for the Parent Support Partner Program at the Association for Children's Mental Health in Michigan. She has over 20 years of experience as a parent and professional, mentoring, supporting, and advocating with families who have children with mental health challenges or intellectual or developmental disabilities, including autism. And she's had a lot of great experience that she is going to share with us today about navigating systems with adult children. So I will hand it over to Margot.
Thank you, Dana. I'm happy to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. So I want to talk a little bit about supporting your child in the adult system. Navigating the adult mental health system with your child is different than when they were a child, because the prescriptive nature of the system is different, but it's totally doable. You just really need to get a different perspective. When I partnered with my son, I went from I can decide what's best for you to let's think about what will help you and support you, because I always wanted to be a welcome part of his treatment team. And I wanted to make sure that we were in sync well before he turned 18. I probably started partnering with him heavily when he was about 16 years old. Some questions to ask your child. What would make you feel more successful? What would you like to do, but you can't? And why are you having trouble doing that? It's really easy when you've had a child that's been in mental health services for a long time, that you kind of like, oh, he would like that. Oh, she would want to do that. They would want to go there. One of the best things I did for my son was ask him, would it help you if someone could work with you to help you figure out how to do that thing? That was the opening for him to get community living supports, which have actually been incredibly useful for him. Do you need a ride to get there or get home? Lots of times as a parent, my son has a severe mental illness and he's also on the autism spectrum. I still will make assumptions about what he knows or doesn't know. And like, I ask him, hey, do you want to go bowling? But like, he doesn't know, are you driving me? Is someone picking me up? How long are we going to be there? All those questions. It's super important to break down the steps involved in whatever you're talking about and ask them if they can do each one. I ask my son all the time, who can help you figure that out? Because honestly, I wanted to be his mom and not his case manager. He doesn't like hearing directions from me because he's not 5 anymore. He's an adult. And one of the things I had to do was, I have a lot of experience in the child system, but instead of asking whose job it's that, who can help us with whatever it is we're trying to do. In the adult system, the hunt for resources is the same as it is with children. The paths, they're not as defined as they are in the child system, but that also gives you a lot of opportunity to try some new things and make some new connections. How you word questions is just as important as what you're asking. The example here, agencies focus on meeting the minimum number of hours that your child's qualified for. Always use the lens, or help parents use the lens, of what your adult child needs to be successful or more independent in that specific area. This is one of my favorite examples. Can't they get more CLS hours? Okay, that invites a no. It's very rarely going to be a yes, but that invites a no. When you ask it, can you help me understand how you determine how many CLS hours he needs to meet these goals he's identified? These conversations I actually had with the team that was working with him. He tried navigating the system on his own for about a year. And I went in with him and asked these questions, and he was able to get some supports, which is great for him, but frustrating for me, because a lot of people don't have a parent that's willing to be involved at 25. If you're serving families that receive Medicaid in Michigan, it's all about medical necessity. I have to believe it's probably similar elsewhere. So when you look at it from a need-driven place, what does he need to be independent? What does she need to have a job? And you're just kind of filling in the holes. I cannot stress this enough. You need to have a team mentality with your child. One of my son's diagnoses is paranoia, which obviously leads itself to complicated personal relationships. But I was very clear that I wanted his team to be able to talk to me if I had questions, but I was adamant that I would never make a decision for him. But I want to be a participating member of the team. If you have concerns that your child's having difficulties or symptoms that maybe they're not sharing, or they don't know to share, anybody can call and share information with any mental health provider, medical provider, any agency. No one's going to tell you that they're a client there, but you literally can just say, I'd like to leave this information for whatever provider you're calling for, and they can pass that on to the provider. With my son, it was very important that I was very direct about not wanting to be his guardian or manage him, because he had been in an inpatient setting, and when he wanted to check himself out, they put him on an immediate 3-day hold. So when he struggles and is in a crisis, he will not seek emergency mental health assistance, because he says they'll keep me. And at CMH, they say, oh, they're not going to do that. And he said, no, that's already happened to me. So no, we're not going to talk about that. And, at least I can be on his side, and I know how to talk to him in such a way that I'm literally just asking information questions like, can you help me understand this? Can you explain this? And we're not having a battle over what's the right or wrong choice.
Do you have anything else to share, Margot?
Honestly, collaborate with your child and start as early as you can. It is very complicated when they're older teenagers. It's such a natural reflex for a parent to want to get them to, you need to follow the rules, follow directions. Okay, I let all of my children manage their mental health medications starting at 17, because at 18 they could do what they wanted. As I'm sure you can imagine, the majority, I have 4 sons, 3 of them went off medication. But allowing them to make that choice when things got hard for them, they felt able to come to me and say, I really don't think I'm okay. What can I do? Because like realistically, he'll go to bed at 17 and wake up at 18. And like, if nothing changes overnight. So I really tried to be proactive with them. Really just to make sure they always felt comfortable with my presence on the team. I have a lot of advocacy experience, and I take that experience when all my children are adults now, and I take that experience when I go with them. And it's being direct without being rude. But like when my son would say, when am I going to get a CLS worker? Well, there's a shortage, you're on the list. And they kept telling him that 7-8 months in a row. And I went to them and I said, okay, so we're all aware that he qualifies for CLS services. I don't know why he's not getting them, but like that has to change. He also has autism, not just a severe mental illness. So let's qualify him with severe mental illness. Oh, well, then he can only have those for 2 or 3 months. And I said, wow, I'm not really sure how you designate him means his need changes. And asking some very direct questions got me some very direct answers. And within probably 7 days, he had a CLS worker. And they wanted to start him at 13 hours a week. He's now up to 15 hours a week by partnering with his CLS worker to talk about what his needs are and what he'd like to do differently. It's been a great success. And yes, I agree. Building the relationships before they turn 18 is so important. And some of that is just being able to let go of what you thought things were going to be like, what you thought they were going to be when they grew up, all of those things, and just accepting them for who they are. And like, I can acknowledge my son's perspective all the time. It doesn't mean I agree with him, and it doesn't mean that I think what he's saying is correct. But it allows him to, I hear him, really, really hear him. So he always feels validated. And because that's the most important part. When people say things, and everybody knows this, to adolescents, teenagers, even adults, oh, no, that's not it. Like, I'm really mad that this person didn't do what I asked. Well, that's not really what happened. They were trying to do this other thing for you. And I've said his whole life, if there's someone that will hold his stance until he dies, that would be my son. And he's very invested in winning. He's very invested in being heard and validated and acknowledged. And that's okay, because he should be, just like everybody should be. I'm looking forward to going into the breakout room and to have some conversation in there. And again, I really appreciate being here, and thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margot. Amazing presentation. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Margot is actually going to be back on April 2nd with her colleague, Chrissy Dristy, to talk more about navigating systems with a transition age and adult children. So make sure to register for that one if you haven't already. Before we go into the breakout rooms, we're really quickly going to do another one of those lovely polls. So you can go back to that same link. My colleagues will put that into the chat if you didn't get that before. And we're just going to answer 2 questions really quickly. The first one, what are the ages of the loved ones that the families you work with support. So are you working with families of infants and toddlers, families of school-age children, families of transition age youth, families of young adults, families of adults, or older adults? You could be working with multiple different age groups here, or primarily one. It looks like we've got the majority of folks working with families of school-age children, but we've got people working with families across the board there. So keep on answering that. And again, we'll share the final results in the follow-up email in the slideshow. All right, keep on answering that for just a second, but we're going to move on to our next question. What is the systems that the families you work with are having the most trouble navigating? We know a lot of these systems are tricky, but we're asking you to pick one. Which is the one that is the most difficult to navigate? This will help frame our breakout room discussions. Looks like a lot of folks are voting for mental health as being the most difficult. Some folks think education is the most difficult to navigate. We've got a few who've had trouble with justice and substance use, housing coming in there, but mental health is still winning, with education close behind. If you did hit other, go ahead and share in the chat. Got one vote for child welfare. All right, keep those coming. Thank you for voting, and we're gonna go back to the slides now because we're gonna transition into our breakout room. But before we do that, I just wanted to go over our community comfort agreements. So as we mentioned at the top of the hour, we use person-centered, family-driven language. So try to avoid blaming and shaming and speak from your lived experience. We also want to focus on strengths, solutions, and opportunities rather than venting. There's always a place for venting, but the breakout rooms, we do have limited time, about 20 minutes. So try to focus on strengths and solutions. We also want to make sure that we're making space for all voices. So we want to keep that 3 then me philosophy in mind. So if you have shared, try and leave room for 3 other people to share their perspective before you contribute to the conversation again. And then we know that this is a really wonderful opportunity to be with those presenters and ask them really pointed questions about your personal situation. But if you could save those for the Q&A and remain engaged in the discussion with our focus question with your colleagues, that would be really wonderful. So we're going to transition into the breakout rooms, and we're going to focus on that 3rd question since you just answered the first 2 in the chat. So we are going to talk about tools and resources that would better support you in navigating systems alongside families. So you might have a situation where you need a specific tool or resource, or you might have one that has been really helpful for you that you can share with the folks in your breakout room. So I'm going to go ahead and open those breakout rooms, and we'll come back together in about 20 minutes to share out. Hi, everyone. As you're coming back into the main room, we've got another question for you on our poll. Again, you can go back, scroll up in that chat and use the link that was put in the chat. You can also go to www.menti.com and type in that code and share with us what you learned from the breakout room. What is a tool you learned about that you want to use in your work? Welcome back, everyone. As you're coming
No.
back in. Oh, go ahead.
I am not sure. Oh, there's Jeanette. Jeanette, did you finish your sentence? And I know Raylene had a question for you that I was just about to call on her. So if we get a chance, I'd love to finish that up.
Well,
Yeah.
it wasn't a question for Jeanette. I was going to ask what school district the woman was that was talking about the children.
Oh, for
What school
Stephanie.
Yes, Stephanie. What school district was she in?
The two, let's see, these families,
Well, I mean state. Were you in New York?
Idaho, I said, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Idaho.
Idaho. Okay. Okay. Well, most schools in states, um, well, no, I'm not gonna say most, all of them have to answer to the feds. Well, so with that being said, you can seek out who's in charge of having the children evaluated in the school settings, and the parents can go from there. Because it's basically finding out what the child or the family's need is, right? The child may need to be in a special school, or they may be just need to be in a different class setting, right? Or need a aide to be with them all day long. And IEPs are federal. So, and with that IEP, it could be tweaked to each individual child. And that would help the child to learn better. And it'll help the family too. Because you know, they have you, so you can help connect them to outside sources that will help them to better serve their IEP, ABA services, um, all kind of services. So the first thing I would suggest is getting them evaluated by the schools.
Thank you for wrapping that up so much, Raylene. So as we're all coming back together, we'd love to hear what you learned in your breakout room. Any tools that you want to bring into your work, you can visit that link that Lachelle just put into the chat, or go to menti.com and type in the code at the top of the page there and share about some of the tools that you learned and want to take into your work. And again, we'll share all the responses there in the chat, in the slides when we send those via email. And if you did not register, make sure to put your email in the chat so you can get those resources. And now I'll turn it over to Gail so that we can open it up for some questions.
Well, a lot of questions about the schools, and I do know that we really didn't focus on the schools today because we usually do schools a lot, and we wanted to focus on some various questions. But I had Shannon. Is Shannon still here, I wonder?
Shannon is still here.
Hi, Shannon. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story with your 27-year-old, if you are comfortable enough to share a bit.
Oh, sure. So he's 27. He was born premature. And since then we've had a laundry list of diagnoses that have come across, but XYY syndrome has been the most impactful. So he has what they consider a borderline IQ. So it makes it very difficult for him to multitask and do a lot of things. And even though I work as a peer advocate as my actual job, I guess I didn't realize I was just parenting my child. And I didn't get all the things for him because I was like, he's good. I'm going to school. We're doing all this stuff. So hearing like that other mom talk about how she started partnering with her son so young and stuff, I think that that's amazing, because my son is so like docile and shy that I just didn't even think about it because he just didn't want to participate. But now that he's 27 and he's like all of a sudden voicing that he would like to do things, it's been a bit of a learning curve for both of us. But we have a thing in New York called Access VR that has been very helpful with trying to help connect him with the agencies that would be good for him. And we haven't like gotten conservatorship or anything, but we've signed releases so that I can like talk with people to help him. So I guess that's the best advice I have at this point, is just to make sure you are talking with your kids and not only just being their parent.
Oh, that's great, Shannon. And I see in the chat, Shirley said to Google partners in policymaking. And I believe that's out of Tennessee, so that might be very interesting.
Thank you.
Margot, if you could, do you have any response to Shannon?
I do actually. I would say a couple things. Okay, the reason I started partnering with my son early is because when they're in school, they hear very regularly, well, when you're 18, your mom doesn't get to come. When you're 18, you get to make your own choices. When you're 18, your mom can't be here unless you want her to. So in a contentious relationship, that's like really a great club for your child to use to like assert some of their authority. Okay, the other thing I'm gonna say, I do not have guardianship of my son. I will not get guardianship of my son. Michigan, we have way more guarded individuals. Like we have, I believe, the second highest number of people with guardians in the United States. I don't know why that is. But okay, first of all, I didn't want to work for my son. And if I was his guardian, then he would be able to tell me what to do and like call me 14 times a day asking for money. Now I can just not answer the phone, but as his guardian, I would have to answer the phone. The other thing is when I'm gone, he has to be able to manage his life and figure out what supports he needs to be independent. And if that means that he gets some self-determination money and he can hire people to help him, great, let's do that. Because then he can be independent and I can be independent. And don't feel bad about not thinking about, your son talking to you about things he wants to do, because you don't know what you don't know. Right. And if they don't ever voice needs or wants or things like that, I don't know that I would think to ask either. But once you realize he has them, it sounds like you're taking the right steps to do that. And again, you can offer information to anybody, like literally, I mean, like you could call a therapist. I did it for my former brother-in-law. I called this therapist and I said, I'm aware that you can't confirm or deny that this person is a patient. Here's some information I think that will benefit you in helping this person if he is your patient. And I just hung up. I mean, they can take that. It doesn't matter.
That's always a really, really good strategy, is just the doctors and the clinicians do not have to talk to you, but if you just tell them things, they can hear it. And that's not breaking HIPAA.
Exactly.
Ebony, there's a question about family peer specialist and going through a cycle. Can you talk a little bit more of how you were talking with how parents and parent peer specialists go through some sort of cycle as they partner together?
Yeah, I don't see the question in the chat. Maybe it was in your breakout. Okay. Yeah. So, we just know that, the process to healing and anyone's journey for, well-being, reunification, whatever that looks like, is all really, it's not a linear process. It's not just a follow a step-by-step process and then wellness and everything you want is achieved. And so when I mentioned that it's kind of cyclical, it's just that we know that in different spaces, depending on where a person is at, they may need more time spent with engagement versus planning, and then moving them back into implementation. And that every step of the way, we should be going back to who we're working with and exploring, where are you at? What are your needs? Do you feel like the services are meeting your needs? And if there needs to be more engagement, because it's not just us engaging, there's other team members that are involved, and they may not have the same level of support or engagement with those folks than they do with us. And so it's really important for us to continually to go back to assess that and see, do we need to take some steps back, or are we good with moving forward?
Thank you, Ebony. And Jeanette, what is the difference? Do you find it very different between the adult justice system and the juvenile justice system?
Huge difference.
It's absolutely, they both different language, different information that you need to learn to navigate. But also for quite some time in New York, a 16-year-old will be charged as an adult and go into the adult facility. And the things, the needs of what a young person needs to be fully develop appropriately, right, it gets disrupted in an adult prison because they weren't going to school, right? Those needs, you know, you don't have your parent who can stand next to you and help you understand a language. And if a parent is lost, right, a 16-year-old does not understand absolutely anything because it sounds like a blur. So I think that, right, whichever system, right, whether you're a 16-year-old or a 26-year-old with challenges, right, whether they mental health or whatever the issue, right, that we're facing, and or services not individual not being connected, right? Every family, and when I hear you, Margot, right? You want to be able to make sure that your child can move forward without you, right? That can be able to tap into those
Absolutely.
resources, right? You don't want, right, put a burden on anybody. You want your child to have the skills that they need to move forward. You know, my mentor used to say, we don't want to support our kids till they're 50 years old.
Well, no, you're right. And the other piece with that is I needed to teach him like, what's the question you want to answer and how do you figure out, like, instead of saying, I don't know who can help me with housing. Okay, so I taught him to say, okay, what do I want to do and who do I think could help me with that? Because he, struggles with a lot of like abstract thinking, just being on the spectrum. And I mean, that has been super helpful for him because he's learning problem solving where he never had any. Like he was able to call me last week and say, I wanted to call you and tell you I did a thing today. And I said, okay, what was that? Well, I called Dad and asked Dad if he had work I could do and earn $80 a month because there's this thing I want to do in my video game. And Dad said yes. And I start next week. And I wanted you to know I did that all by myself. And I said, that is fantastic. What a great thing. And he was so proud of himself because he's like, well, I knew that I helped support him. And he's like, okay, and I appreciate that, but like, I want my own money. I bet you do. And that, like, I give you what I can, but I mean, he was proud that he found something to do and a way to earn money. And that was a huge win for him.
And
What an adult thing. That is fabulous,
You-
really. That is fabulous.
And that's what you want to be able to see, right? That your child can navigate, you know. And I talk about my juvenile justice involvement, right? Because that was
Mhm.
what I worked on. But I have 6 children and one with special needs who graduated from a private school because I was able to demonstrate that the public school was not meeting her needs. She wanted to
Right.
learn. Right. And I couldn't put any barriers or obstacles. So thank you, Margot, because right, it's who do we connect our children to so that they can provide them with the extra extended support that they need.
Well, and I'm glad you worded it like that because I have people that I've worked with over like the last 15 years who work in one that works for a center for independent living, one that works as a parent mentor who does some other stuff. He knows those people and how to access them. So if he can't ask me a question, he'll say, I have this friend I used to work with, Cindy. I call her Gma because she's little and tiny. And he says, well, I bet if I called Gma, she would know. I bet you're right.
That
And-
is great for a circle of friends. And we could go on and on with this conversation. And guess what? We will, because we're having the second part of this next month. It's a special session. It's on April 2nd on Tuesday, just like today at 3:00. And you're welcome to register for that. And Margot and her colleague Chrissy will be doing it. Chrissy is a younger adult who's going to talk about her position too. But you'll hear more from Margot. So I ask you to join us. And then, of course, on April 9th at 3:00, we start a two-part series for professional responsibilities and confidentiality, ethics and boundaries. And we're really going to focus, I believe, on ethics this month, right, Dana?
So next month, for April, it'll be confidentiality, ethics, and boundaries all together from our staff, as well as Nikki Howenstein, who's a director of mental health services in Indiana. And then we'll have another one in May that's more focused on cultural humility.
Ah, that's what it is. So my mistake. Thank you, Dana, for correcting me. Next slide. And of course, this is a SAMHSA sponsored webinar, and we have other SAMHSA sponsored webinars. We have family-centered, family-driven mental health and substance use support, a path towards equity. And you can register for that. And here's a little list of our tentative schedules. And of course, you can always contact any of us. You'll be getting all our contact information, including Ebony's, Jeanette's, and Margot's. So feel free to reach out, send us an email. And one last favor, as you're exiting our event today, you can, when you leave, you will be automatically taken to a survey, and the survey actually helps let SAMHSA know that we're doing our job, and also helps us learn what we can do better. So feel free to please actually answer the survey. Once you take the survey, you will also then be redirected to a certificate of attendance that you can download and put your name on it and keep it, because you can use that for renewal of your national certification, or if you're planning to get a national certification or anything else that needs family support hours, feel free to use that certificate of attendance. You can also take a picture of our scan here, and that also takes you to the survey. Anyways, we would love to hear this feedback, and we really need it, and we'd love to see you today. So thank you for coming. I hope to see all of you on April 2nd, and of course on April 9th. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.